After- Good evening, everyone. Welcome from wherever you're joining today. My name is Susan, and I'm joined by the amazing Dexibit founder, Angie Judge. Welcome, Angie.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Susan.
Today, we are going to be talking all about Google Analytics. But to begin with, I'm going to take you through a quick intro to Dexibit for anyone that may be new here. And then we will get straight into Google Analytics. So if you're new to Dexibit, we do data analytics specifically for visitor attractions. This is for both cultural and commercial organizations. Our mission is to democratize data, and we do that by bringing together all sorts of data from around the visitor's experience in your venue's operations. So things like footfall, ticketing, CRM, point of sale, e-commerce, social web, weather, and so much more. So I will share my screen now. Give me one moment. So this is Dexibit. It is software as a service. And here you can invite as many users as you like. You can build dashboards, reports, insights, forecasts, which you can then turn into scheduled email reports at a click of a button. In Dexibit, we have an extensive library of visualizations. And to add one to your dashboard, you can simply search for the topic you're looking for and click Add to add it in. And this is an example dashboard. So here you can see lots of different data coming together in these visualizations to get everything from very high level data right down through to the very detailed data. And recently we have activated Google Analytics in Dexibit. So to start us off, maybe Angie could tell us what the story is with the Universal Analytics versus GA4.
Sure. Thanks, Susan, for that introduction. Yeah, the space of Google Analytics has been an interesting one because in the last few years, Google actually introduced a new approach to analytics, which they did back in, I think it was 2020. And in July of last year, that became compulsory. So the old version of Google Analytics was called Universal Analytics. And the new version is a name that you might be familiar with. It's called GA4. So that became compulsory in July 1 of last year. You might have upgraded your website before that, or you might have switched over to GA4 beforehand. There's been some changes to their user interface and all of that sort of thing, but the most important change from the data perspective is really just to understand that Universal and GA4 have slightly different approaches to data. GA4 is more oriented around the idea of user events. It still includes a bunch of metrics that look at the number of sessions, so the number of times people have come in and used your website, and the idea of unique users, so the number of people alone who have used your website. So, for example, I might come twice, Susan might come once. That's 3 sessions and 2 unique users. But GA4 talks a lot more about events. So an event might be something as simple as a page view or me clicking a button on a page, or it might be something more substantial. So in the old version of Google Analytics Universal, we had this idea of conversion. So when people sort of click through your website, and maybe in the case of a visitor attraction, bought a ticket or maybe even purchased something in your e-commerce store, that would be sort of known as a conversion. It could also be something more mundane, say joining a email marketing list or something like that if they signed up to be a subscriber, or maybe it's something like membership. But in GA4, we sort of see this language emerge of the idea of events. So those are sort of called key events these days rather than conversions, but we'll still use the same language interchangeably, given they're pretty much the same thing. So what I will do is hop into Dexibit and just show you what Google Analytics looks like here. Bear with me while I change my screen over. There we go. And So I guess the big question to start off with is, why would you use Dexibit to look at Google Analytics data when you can look at it in Google Analytics itself? Which is a very valid question. We wouldn't suggest that anybody stops using Google Analytics as an interface if they're already using it. So for example, if that is a sole focus or a core focus of your role, and perhaps you're in the marketing team at your attraction, or maybe you're a specific analyst whose job is purely to deal with Google Analytics, you're probably going to be very much in the depths of Google Analytics every day and potentially using a few specialist tools around that as well. But if you're not in Google Analytics every day, it can be quite a confusing tool to go into and look at from time to time. And so it's quite nice to have an easy way to do that, and to be able to access that data in the same place that you do every other data set from your attraction, whether that's ticketing or point of sale or membership or whatever that looks like in Dexibit. So first of all, if you're not in Google Analytics every day, this is a nice central place to come to get all of your data. The second thing is that it's great if you're then sharing that data with other people. So again, that you can sort of schedule email reports and those sorts of things straight from Dexibit and access all of the nice features to be able to put Google Analytics data in a dashboard together with other data to report on to your user or to your stakeholders internally. And then the third thing is that Dexibit is great for mixing Google Analytics with other data. So as soon as we want to do something like compare what's happening on site with what's happening online, and we need multiple data sets to do that, Dexibit is a great place to do that. So hopefully it makes it easier to work with, easier to share, and easier to mix with other data by doing that in Dexibit. So this is some Google Analytics data coming in through here. If you are using Dexibit and you don't have that connected, you can talk to your data success team. And I'll just flip here into looking at the data platform, so we can come in here and create a connection for various different sources, including digital for Google Analytics. And if you like, we can backfill that. In the case of GA4, we'd be backfilling that to whenever you started GA4 and switched over, which might be sort of July 1, 2023, or potentially beforehand. And I'm just going to come here and just bear with me for a second. I'm in Data Explorer and I'm looking behind the scenes at all my different data sets. And we'll have a look here for Google Analytics, because I want to point something quite important out to everyone. And that is that when we bring Google Analytics data in, there is a huge amount of data that we can get from Google to the point of being too much. And so we try and whittle that down into some really useful common things that is going to be things that we need to use every day in this kind of context. But interestingly, they are really two separate data sets, because they consider two quite different things or objects that they're orienting around. So the first one is pages. So this is information about a particular page or group of pages on your website, and to say how many people have been looking at that for a given time period, and what sort of events have they been doing on those pages. And the second data set is sessions. So that's more oriented towards the user. So how many unique users have been coming to your website and where have they been coming from? Because when we consider them, they're really two separate things. And for each of these data sets, there's then lots of different attributes. So I just wanted to point that out before we dive in, because it helps to know, am I trying to report on the number of people who have been coming to my website and who they are, or am I trying to report on the performance of different pages on my website and who's looking at them? So slightly two different things depending on what you're after. So when we look at this data in Dexibit in the dashboard, in the library, you'll find some standard visualizations from us. You can, of course, add them into your into your dashboard as you normally would, just by clicking the plus button. And you should find as well a template dashboard that deals with Google Analytics in your dashboard list. So just click the blue hamburger button here. And you'll notice that these visualizations contain both a mix of those sessions data, so about the people coming to your website, and pages data, so about the website itself. And we can then do all sorts of things. So you can see in Dexibit, for every data source you can access every attribute, or in this case of Google Analytics, a subset of the very many attributes you can get out of Google Analytics, so a subset that we think is going to be useful. And here we can have a look at the descriptions for each of these attributes so that you know what you're looking at. And this is really important with Google Analytics data because they're very specific about what they mean by particular attributes. So, for example, something like user engagement duration, like what does that mean? And we can see here that this is the length of time of a session, so the period of time that I spent on a website at any given moment, when the session is active. And that means that I'm actually looking at the website and it's not just a tab that's open on my browser amongst the thousands of tabs that I have open at any given time. And so you can see here these descriptions for each one of these attributes. And another way to access this information is to click on the data dictionary so that you can pull up a list of sources that are available with this particular, or a list of attributes available with this particular system. You can see random sample data for each of these and get those descriptions as well. So it's a nice, easy way to sort of navigate yourself around that system. If you're an expert user, you can go into that data explorer, as we were looking at before, and actually get in there and change those descriptions if you don't like the way that we have described them, or add new derived metrics and transform your metrics and all of these sorts of things. So that's really fun. So we have this ability to graph any one of these things at a given time, and also to decide how we're going to group by and display this data on the chart. So a couple of examples here. The first one is, of course, how many people or how many sessions has my website been seeing over time. So this isn't, again, coming back to this definition, the sessions is the number of times that your website has been used by someone. It's not necessarily reflective of the number of users, because that would be a unique user, so a number of times that an individual person has come, and they may come multiple times. So a session being the number of times your website has been used. So I'm going to plot this one. I'm going to add up all of the sessions. I'm going to look at this data, in this case, over time by week. And I am looking at it here on a spline chart. So this is a nice little graph just to see how many people have been using my website. And I might want to maybe look at the average per day, for example. You can see not too many coming in per day, average per week. And I might want to come in here and look at something, maybe to switch this around and look by, say, day of week, for example, to see how many user sessions have been happening on each weekday when I'm adding this up. And here I'm looking at a couple of months worth, so there's quite a lot there. Next, I want to come into here and look at my page view growth rate. So again, here I'm switching over my data sets, and I'm looking at the number of pages that people are viewing on my website. So this is different to the number of sessions, because I'm looking at a session might be a time when a user is looking at multiple pages on my website. So if we remember back to unique users, so for example, Susan and I, website session. So for example, I've come twice, Susan's come once, that's 3. And then in my session, I might look at 10 pages and Susan might look at 5, and I've come twice. So we've got 25 page views in there. So you can see as we're sort of starting to traverse these different metrics, how they change. So here, for example, I'm starting to look at a growth rate here over weeks, so a week-on-week growth rate, to see maybe I'm starting a new Google Analytics or Google Ads campaign, and I want to see if it's really taking off. And you can see I'm largely doing a pretty good job, apart from 1 week in there where I had a bit of a dip that got into sort of negative 6% growth, but certainly better than where my campaign started here beforehand, where things were in negative growth. Another fun thing, of course, is to look at your top pages by views. So again, we can use that same metric, page views, and then start to group by page title. So for example, this might be who has come to look at the exhibitions page, who has come to look at the visit page, and so forth. One really fun thing that you can do in Dexibit is add in derived metrics. So this is a little expert tip and something that you can't do in Google. So heaps of fun to do here in Dexibit. So I'm going to flick back into our Data Explorer, and we're going to have a look in this Google Analytics pages data set. And you can see I've added in a derived metric. So to do this, we click the ... add derived metric, give it a name and a description. And what I'm going to do with this derived metric is, if this page falls into the kind of category or classification of pages that I deem this is a page that somebody's coming to when their behavior is that they're thinking about visiting. Maybe this is a page where somebody's coming to when their behavior is that they're sort of engaging with education materials. And maybe these pages over here are something that people are coming to when they're engaging with us in an e-commerce sense, for example. I can start to classify sort of, in this case, the intent behind that website activity, so that I can see when I'm starting to graph this data, maybe the different channels that my performance is coming in by, and whether those channels are delivering that sort of intent to visit performance. So this is just one example of something I thought would be fun to do with my data. But there can, of course, be lots of different ways that you might use derived metrics as well. A couple of other really cool examples that I've seen some of our customers do is some of them have got websites that are served up in different languages. And so they can create a derived metric to sort of cap them into different languages and say, sort of, this is the Spanish set, this is the Japanese set, this is the French set, and they can sort of have a look at how their website is performing from a language perspective. So they've done that using the URL or the page title where that language is evident. And lastly, one cool thing that, again, is special that you can't do in Google Analytics, which is really fun to do in Dexibit, is to start to mix up this data with other data. So, for example, here, I've combined my Google Analytics data. So this is my sum of my Google Analytics sessions with my visitation, just to overlay the two side by side, because you can see here they have slightly different trends and patterns happening within them, and I'm interested to maybe study those. And I could potentially turn that into a conversion rate. So here you can see I've clicked on the cog button to add a secondary data set to a primary data set. In this case, I've started with my visitation and I've ended with my Google Analytics, and I've chosen an overlay type, but equally I could come and look at this as a ratio, for example, if I wanted to see sort of how many pages does somebody look at on Google Analytics before they come, or how many sessions am I clocking up on my website before somebody walks on site. And I might want to actually start to narrow down this Google Analytics data, potentially with that metric that I made before, to query so that I'm only looking at pages with an intent to visit rather than all of my website audience. Because quite often with visitor attractions, particularly with cultural institutions, there's a huge audience of the website that are coming to the website to engage with like collections material or education material or e-commerce material that will never visit. And that's part of potentially a museum or gallery or zoo's sort of work and mission in the world, is to engage with that online audience, but they're not necessarily a useful thing to compare to on-site visitation. So we might want to narrow down that web traffic here. So I could do that here in my filter, and I could do sort of something like an intent to visit is what have we got here, is true, and start to narrow down this data set here so that I'm only looking at that. Let's use the magic wand and see if that's how I should be writing that. Oh, no, it's not. And I'll come back to that one later on when I'm not doing live queries in front of a live audience. And so that is largely most of what I wanted to share with you all today, to be able to look at the differences between Universal and GA4, to be able to look at the how you go behind the scenes with Google Universal, GA4 data, and looking at those two data sets, all the different attributes, and then how to start working with those in Dexibit. There's just a whole raft of things that you can do with this data, and it does really make it nice and easy to have it in one place with all of your other data in a way that's just really familiar, that you can use all of the sorts of normal things of Dexibit. So things like passing for day of the week, for example, or maybe changing your graph type or laying up different date ranges. The only one last thing that I would leave you with is when you are working with Google Analytics data, just consider that sometimes it is already to a degree pre-aggregated in some sense. And you'll find some warnings about that in some of the attributes that we look at here. And that is, for example, if you're looking at unique users over time, if you choose like a week and then you look at unique users, or if you choose a month and you look at unique users, that data is already going to be pre-aggregated for that time period. So just consider that when you're working with data, to be careful about what you're summing up and averaging. And you can see that one caught me out earlier. And just to keep that in mind when you're working with this data, it is one of the nuances of websites and Google Analytics data, and something to be careful of. Thanks very much, Susan. I think that was all I had to go through for today. Have we got any questions that we need to answer?
We do. We've got a question here. What if you use Google Analytics for your mobile app?
Oh, that's a really good one. And so you may have that set up potentially, I imagine for most, as an entirely different Google Analytics integration. So you can sort of set up multiple Google Analytics integrations if you're running that as like a separate site with a whole different instance, particularly if you've got a vendor engaged for that and not the same vendor as your website potentially. Or even if you're using a third-party app and they're then using Google Analytics as part of that. So we can set up multiple Google Analytics integrations to pull that data in. The data will look different, but has the same sort of structure about it for a mobile app. And there's lots of other instrumentation methods for mobile apps, depending on the app itself that you can use for this. The same is true if you're looking at different sites. So for example, if you've got a sub-site for your collection and a sub-site for sort of your visitor attraction proper, and maybe some sub-sites for other things as well, you might either have those as entirely different installs of Google Analytics, or you might have them together as a property and get all of the data together as one.
Amazing. Thank you, Angie. So much you can do
Thank
with
you.
analytics. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.